And then we have a question for you all before we dive into the speakers. Just curious what everybody's favorite cover crop species are. So I'm going to drop this participation link in the chat. All right. Does anybody want to talk about their favorite species?
I put in white clover just because I've liked it for walkways.
I put in sorghum Sudan because it outcompeted, I think, some Canadian thistle last year in one of our fields.
I put in oats and peas because it's a nice quick one that I can do either spring or fall.
Buckwheat for the bees.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. All right. I think with that, we're just going to jump into the presentations. I'll turn it over to Tom to share about his experience with cover crops on the Gorman Farm.
Thank you, thank you. Let's see, share some screen action. Should be seeing something? All right. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll take my about allotted 10 minutes and try to talk about three of the kind of weird cover crops that we do. So we do kind of some classic winter rye, some pea oat, some sorghum Sudan grass, some buckwheat, the kind of standard textbook ones. And our farm's weird because it's a nonprofit. We donate everything. We have an endowment from a real estate developer, so we have a fairly healthy budget, and we're land rich, and so we can kind of waste some land on cover crop. And so we have that luxury of doing some weird stuff. So the biggest weird thing I think we do is perennial walkways. I love turf grasses. I love mowing. A lot of people on our staff love mowing. We can get somebody to volunteer to come and mow this pretty much. So, and it's like an easy thing for unskilled labor of just like, yeah, come and take the 30-inch push mower and just go right through this. And it looks really nice after you do it too. So it's very satisfying. Like people fight over this job on the crew of like, oh yeah, I'll take the next 45 minutes and walk and mow. So we generally have 30-inch beds, 30-inch walkways. We established it 3 years ago. It's been going good. We haven't had to kind of reset it. We do overseed with white clover, kind of the whole acreage in like February. But it was mainly seeded with like a low mow turf type tall fescue, some fine fescues, some clovers were in there too. So we just kind of seeded everything and then kind of strip tilled with 30-inch walk behind tiller. And then for maintenance mowing, we just use a 30-inch walk behind mower. If we're lazy and it gets out of hand, then we'll break out the flail mower on the walk behind and do it. But for the most part, we can get away with a couple times a month mowing the walkways, and then all the ecological benefits, and our shoes don't get muddy, erosion, bins don't get dirty. So we're like wasting a lot of land, but we get a lot of benefits, and we're not land restricted. So that's kind of nice. And then, so that's one photo of it. It's also on a private landowner's property, and he's the one supporting the farm financially. So we try to make it pretty, and he likes mowing and grasses and more green on the land. And it also just kind of aesthetically is like a really easy block design of 30 inches here, 30 inches there, and then that unit is 5 feet wide, and so it makes a lot of math easy for us. We haven't had a huge issue with like the perennial walkways creeping into the beds. Our biggest issue is probably meandering beds and walkways that occasionally the walkway will kind of skinny up. And then your wheels of the mower kind of get into the bed. But usually that's not a huge deal, and usually you can get by with just kind of one pass down the walkway with a 30-inch mower, and it gets most of the walkway. And with our kind of main hoeing down the center of a double row, and then on left and right side of the crop, that usually keeps the walkways at bay. But I I I hesitate to recommend this to some people who like beginner like community gardeners and students I work with, because there is that kind of added layer of maintenance. But for us, it seems to work out well. Mulches keep it at bay for sure. You can kind of see the garlic on the right, and I think I have some more photos. But mulching and hoeing usually keeps the perennial pathway um, from creeping into the bed. And after we bring out the crop in fall, then it usually kind of slowly creeps in. But that's fine. That's yay, cover crops, healing the little scar that we or the wound that we opened up into the earth. And yeah, works with double row, triple row. We don't do any like 6 rows or like 12 rows per bed. We don't do carrots, we don't do leafy greens. That I would almost never do with living walkways. And once the crop gets kind of big enough, we can side discharge on the mower too, and so then we can get some clippings thrown into the bed too, which is kind of nice. But for the most part, we're mowing with the mulching blade on and just dropping the clippings right down. Oh yeah, here's with garlic. So it works really well with garlic. I love it a lot. When we mulch, I don't think I have a photo, but yeah, when we mulch, the walkways almost disappear just because the straw goes everywhere. But then in spring, I think this is like April 15th or something. The walkways kind of come back and the grass kind of grows up through it, and then it's lovely to walk through there and pull scapes, which is just everyone's favorite thing to do ever. And then the mulch kind of eventually just kind of disappears, and then you're just mowing through the waist high garlic. Um, so that's our perennial or one system that we do perennial walkways with. We also use a bioplastic mulch. We're not organic certified, so we use this bioplastic mulch. And we kind of establish this perennial walkway at right after we lay the plastic. So we lay the plastic and then broadcast on just white clover. Next year, we're definitely going to add like a quicker annual grass to it because we had so much erosion in May, June. It was the wettest May, June, I think, on record for our county. And so we had a huge amount of erosion. You could see the good germination in the white clover is kind of in the ditches right next to the bioplastic. So definitely looking to add like an annual rise, something quick, maybe oats or something that we can put in this walkway. I'd love everybody's ideas on this of just something to mix into the white clover so that it greens up quickly and kind of resists erosion. Um, and then we kind of grow on 2 acres and then cover crop 2 acres. So this land will kind of have strips of white clover in we'll leave the perennial walkways, and then we planted rye where the bioplastic was. And photo on the right is just Carmen Peppers being Carmen Peppers, being awesome. But also you can kind of see the perennial walkway eventually kind of like creeps up onto the raised bed. And then by the time the crop's out and the bioplastic is out, it has kind of like crept onto the shoulders of the bed, which is kind of nice. So that's our perennial pathways, the kind of two systems of perennial pathways, the kind of established turf that's been there for 3 years and ideally stays there for a couple more years. And then how we kind of incorporate perennial pathways into a bioplastic rotation. The next one, sweet alyssum, we got this idea unashamedly from YouTube. This is a screen capture from Daniel Mays at Frith Farm, I think, kind of the edges of the tunnel that you can step on it. It attracts bugs. It self seeds. The seed is pretty cheap. So this is a screen capture from a YouTube episode there. So we were mimicking that this past year in our cat tunnel here. Is a 14 by 96 cat tunnel. So 3 beds of double row hot chili peppers. And so on the very edge, you can kind of see like a green fuzz. That's where we kind of took some pinches of sweet alyssum and just kind of sprinkled along the edge. And I am so sorry I don't have a photo later in the season because it basically extended to the middle of the bed, the sweet alyssum, that we kind of lost our like outer rows on the outer beds of peppers, that the sweet alyssum just kind of took it over, which was fine by us, but definitely something, if you're really counting on that yield, then keep hacking that alyssum back because it is pretty aggressive. Um, and ideally we would have planted it kind of more like this, where it's like along the line and in line with your ground posts. But we when we installed this cat tunnel 3.5 years ago, we put woven landscape and then punctured the rebar through that. And so like that, the landscape fabric is kind of holding the edge and holding the line. And so ideally we would peel that 3 foot back and then have just like a 2.5 foot wide swath of alyssum just going down parallel with those bars down the length, or down with the posts parallel with the length of the cat tunnel. But so we kind of like, we had the alyssum encroach far too much. It was spectacular. Like the alyssum was phenomenal, but it kind of ate down our peppers. And the chili peppers were slow to establish, so maybe a quicker growing crop that could kind of hold its own and kind of get the canopy before the sweet alyssum took over. But man, sweet alyssum is intense, but I love it very much. So we trialed it in the cat tunnel. We also trialed it in this high tunnel, and so you can kind of we just plopped this high tunnel on top of our existing kind of 5 bed system with 30-inch walkways in between. And so we're like, oh, how do we establish rows in here? And we tried to keep the perennial walkways going here. You can kind of see the walkway going down there. And I was like, oh, 2 months of this not getting rain and not getting drip, this turf is done for. It's still green in there. I don't get how this turf is still going. Uh, I don't know, but it's lovely in there. You don't have dusty floors in your high tunnel. It's I don't know how it's still existing, but turf is quite impressive. And so we kind of were able to keep our perennial turf walkways in our high tunnel still. We'll see how long they last. But we also try to listen along the kind of understory of the tomatoes, and that worked pretty well. Both photos here on the left are of the same bed. One's just kind of looking from the east, and one's looking from the west. This was by far the best established bed of alyssum because it had all the direct sunlight, because this is on the south side of the tunnel, and so it wasn't getting shade from all the different the vineyard of tomatoes in here. And so you can see the photo on the right. The alyssum was there. It wasn't nearly prolific at all, but it was there, and it was decent at outcompeting weeds. We did maybe 3-4 weedings with hose, and then we established the alyssum, and then it was maybe 3-4 kind of walk through and just kind of hand pull some stuff. But this was lovely. No aphid issues in this tunnel, and attribute that a lot to the alyssum. And it's just lovely, lovely stuff. Last one, potatoes and mustard. This was based off a master's student's research in the horticulture department with conventional potatoes in the central sands. So the theory was basically, after your last hilling, plant whatever you want in the furrow. So her name was Emma Schmidt. She trialed cereal rye, mustard, I think sorghum Sudan, some other stuff. I think big blue stem also. And she saw essentially no dip in yield, no matter how dense or what species she established in the furrow after last hilling. So this is our half-acre potato patch last year. With all the wetness and whatever, we only got 1 hilling in. and we hill with the rotary plow. It's not efficient, but it's a fun job. Yeah, we only got one hilling in, so then we established the mustard afterwards. Just got a bag of oilseed mustard, and started to throw it in there. And so we just we were dropping it right in the furrow for a couple rows, and then that was going really slow. So we just put on the chest spreader and just started spreading it around. And so you can't really see it. I was really skeptical and worried because I'm like, the potatoes don't look that big, and you're throwing out all this mustard on here, and you're like, am I going to ruin my potatoes? And it felt like I was going to ruin my potatoes, but the mustard just kind of sat in there. It was a couple inches tall. The potatoes were controlling canopy, and then we were digging up some of Rue's research potatoes, and I just found this and just had to take a photo of it. And then nobody else in the world except people like you all will appreciate how cool this photo is, that we found this. But the mustard kind of filled in. It kind of matched the dying of the potato vines, and then the mustard was just kind of like coming up. So it kept good cover, and it never seemed to compete with the potatoes. As the potatoes were dying, the mustard kind of filled in the gap. So we kind of had this, like, this is post harvest. We mowed down the vines and we mowed down the mustard in order to harvest it. And I thought, oh, we're going to kill this mustard. No way. But this is like 3 weeks after harvest. We spread on some clover and some rye and basically whatever was left in all the bags of various cover crops we had, and just kind of threw it down onto this half acre. And all these kind of big chunks of green, big leafy greens are the mustard that survived harvest, which our mechanical harvester, I was like, how did this mustard do it? But you can kind of see the left side of the photo is where we were kind of sprinkling it in by hand into the furrow. That didn't work that great, but it was way more tedious and way more delicate. And I thought it was going to be, oh yeah, this side's going to be way better. And then we did that, and it was going real slow. So then on the right side of the field, we strapped on the chest spreader, just started spinning it on, and that took like 5 minutes for the rest of the quarter acre. And it looks like established much better. So quicker, easier. Somehow it was better. Yeah, that's all I got. Those are our kind of three weird cover crop scenarios that we're playing around with. We're definitely going to redo the potato and mustard one. We might trial a couple different species. We might throw some other stuff into the mix along with the mustard, see how that works. We're certainly going to redo the alyssum, because that just held the edges of our tunnel super duper nice. And there were a lot of beneficials in there, a lot of predators. And then our perennial walkway, I mean, that was kind of a founding principle of our farm. So we're definitely keeping those, but adding probably an annual rye. And I heard online to try out teff as like a warm season, decently low growing thing to put in between bioplastic and fall brassicas. But that's what I got. Happy to join in the chat, and continue the combo.
It's Tom. I think we got a couple minutes for questions. Anybody have any questions?
You said you noticed some beneficials on the alyssum. Did you also notice better control of pests?
Oh, maybe. We had some early aphid outbreaks that we didn't do anything with, and then they never caused a problem. But who knows what that's due to? We found a bunch of praying mantises late in the season. That was fun. Some toads and tons of toads, but some little frogs are always fun to find too. I don't know. I don't know. It makes you feel good when you walk past it, and you're like, yeah, more green on the ground and flowers.
Yeah.
It's pretty. And the alyssum was flowering until like December 5th. It was weird.
Can you say what sort of turf grasses you had in your perennial pathways again?
Yeah, it was a low mow mix. So I forget exactly, but the dominant was fescues, like turf type tall fescue, regular tall fescue, because turf type will heal itself, but then you also run that risk of it creeping into the bed. Whereas like Kentucky 31 tall fescue is a bunch grass. It won't heal itself, but it won't creep into the walkways. I think it was also like a 5% Kentucky blue. So that's a creeping one that'll heal, but then you run the risk of it going in the beds. And then perennial rye. Also, it was a good bit of perennial rye too, which is a bunch grass. So I think between the tall fescue and the perennial rye, that's probably why we're not seeing much of it creep into the beds. And when it does have like a wound in it from like a footprint or a shovel or a deer, usually a dandelion takes over or a plantain. So, and we just mow those and are
Yeah.
okay with them.
Cool.
Oh yeah, and then we throw winter rye in there, or not winter rye, white clover.
Oh, yeah. When you see the turf grass just all at the same time?
We established a turf in spring, which was not the best. I mean, it's best to do it in fall. But we got lucky. It was pretty wet that spring that we established it 3-4 years ago. And then the white clover we frost seed on in like February. And that's into the beds also. Because we're not planting those until usually a fall harvest.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Cool. Great. Yeah, thanks again, Tom. Tenzin, you want to go next?
Sure. Maybe somebody can help me understand how to share my screen here. Oh, there we go. I think I got it.
Yeah.
All right. Are you guys with me?
Looks good.
Great. Well, I gotta start at the beginning though. So, we're in Athens, Wisconsin, and north central Wisconsin. So this is all pretty tight turnaround. I decided to just sort of like walk you through sort of one full scenario that is our plastic mulched. In our case, it's our brassica field, which is plastic mulched with these living aisle pathways that then goes into a full fallow year that we use with a lot of cover cropping. So this kind of covers most of the things that we're doing with cover cropping, and it's going to kind of go over 2 seasons, except that these pictures are not all like of that. They're just example pictures. So if you see some inconsistencies here, that there are. Uh, okay, so this is our garlic field this fall, but this is more or less what it looks like when we lay out our plastic in Nebraska's. And what we do is we make our plastic beds, but we drive just outside the wheel track of the last pass to create a wider aisle. And then I have like these rolling basket cultivators that we use to level and make sort of a seed bed in that middle aisle, because there's like a compacted ridge that forms. And so that kind of levels it out. And then we just seed a mix down in the aisle. This, because it's garlic, is winter rye, but typically our mix is white Dutch clover, oats, and millet. And occasionally, so in our brassicas, I would also put some perennial rye, because I know it's going into a full season of cover cropping, and so I'm happy to have that over winter, whereas I'm not always, depending on what the crop is. Okay, so then that kind of comes up looking like this. Now we're in onions, but you can see the clover coming through down in there, but the oats especially really take off and serve as a nurse crop for that before we mow them down. the reason I use oats and millet is because the millet does really well in warmer season stuff, but also in drier conditions. So if we end up in a drought period, the millet seems to carry through, whereas the oats fizzle. And so I just hedge my bet and put them both out every time. Okay, so then this is that same field once it's ready to mow. And if you look close, I don't know, maybe I can, no, I can't do that. If you look closely, the oats are like just kind of heading out. And so then we'll go through there with a BCS flail mower. This is a slightly different system, but that's what we use. And we just go through and mow those aisles. And that's really nice because it chops it into tiny little bits and lays it right down in the path. It doesn't fling anything anywhere. Nobody on our farm, however, volunteers for that job. So maybe I do need to move to an easier to push contraption. This one kind of wears you out, but it works really nice. And then skipping a lot of steps here, we harvest out our crops, we disc up the whole field, work it all up. I do disc a bit lightly in the brassica field, so that the clover will sort of persist through the winter in those aisles. The clover really comes up nice. I wish I had a better picture of that. But by the end of the season, it's a beautiful aisle of clover, and occasionally that perennial ryegrass too. So then I disc that all up just to level it back out a bit. And then I plant winter rye, oats, and peas. And then this is a picture of the oats and peas having sort of frosted off. So this is actually this fall, but just we got this really late fall, so I was able to get a picture of that. So the winter rye persists under there, and that way I get a really thick stand in the fall, but then the oats and peas die off, so there's some dead dying material in the spring. In the spring, it'll basically look like this, and then, but that winter rye is still green and ready to take off, but now it's at a regular seeded rate. So I seed very heavy in the fall, and those oats and peas might get 6 inches tall or 10 inches tall, and that might be it, but and then we frost seed into that. So into that rye, I'm going to frost seed clover and flax. And so that gets frost seeded in, and then the rye grows up through that, and you can't even see the clover or flax or any of that in there. But I'm mowing the rye off before it's setting head. So I don't want to kill that rye, but I want to just take it down to the ground. So now you've got the dead oats and peas in there. You've got the little just starting to grow clover and flax. And now you're mowing off this rye to kind of set it back, make it drag its feet a little bit and get some light in there and not let it totally shade out the clover and flax. So I mow that off. And then you can see the kind of clover and flax peeking up through here. We let that grow up, mow it off, let it then, oops. And that kind of looks like that. So you can see the residue. All this clover here is the aisles, what were the aisles the year before. So that clover never quite died out, and so it's really lush and abundant. And then the other stuff grows up underneath a little bit. We'll yeah, there you go. There's a flax and some clover in there. So then we let that grow up, and then we let it seed out or start to seed. You know, at anthesis, I'll go in then and mow that. And then once that's mowed off, at anthesis, and I mow kind of high that time, I just want to clip those heads and the rye's kind of ready to die once it's putting its energy into making seed. And then we'll leave it and let the oats and flax, sorry, not oats, the clover and flax really come up and get lush. And so then this is what it looks like when I finally mow it down, and I'll completely disc and chisel and do a full reset midsummer. So this would be like, I don't know, maybe early to mid-June. It looks like this. It kind of breaks my heart to do that at this stage, but I like to get in there, and then all the different perennial weeds and whatever that we have in there get a full reset, and it's totally just bare and pounded for a couple of weeks. I mean, I try to be nice, but I want to really get a reset on the midsummer weeds, because that's the only point in our system that gets that. And then, oh boy, So, okay, so then that gets reset, and then I replant with another cover crop, a midsummer cover crop that's going to be oats and peas and sorghum Sudan and sunflowers and phacelia and um, sometimes buckwheat, depending how things are going. Um, and millet goes in there. So it's sort of the whole kitchen sink, everything but winter rye, or anything perennial. And then that starts to grow up, and it will either get our chickens run through there. One of our employees has a chicken operation, so you can just kind of see that now emerging, and the chickens go in there, and then it continues to grow up and get nice and lush and big into the fall. And then once it's at this stage, I'm either going to mow it off if I need to get into there the next spring. I'll mow it off and spread compost over it. So this is obviously a different field, but just spreading the compost, and then it kind of lays in there. This is again a little bit different system, different part of that field. But so then you've got this kind of mowed cover crop. It's still kind of coming up. There's some dying stuff, there's some growing stuff, there's some compost all kind of in there. And then this is what I'll be able to break into in the spring. There's no big strings, hopefully, at that point. Or I just let it ride out into the fall and winter. And so this is kind of what it looks like going into fall. You can see I was trying to take a picture of a bee in the middle there, I think, but it actually showed up the cover crop a little better than my bee picture. So this is what that'll look like going into the fall, and we'll just let it stand and hold. So what would follow in this rotation is midsummer crops, so peppers and tomatoes and green beans and sweet corn and stuff like that. So everything that's going in here, I'm going to have plenty of time. I just want to let that winter kill or do whatever it's going to do, and I'll have lots of time to get into there and work that up in the spring. That's it.
Thanks, Tenzin. Any questions for Tenzin? There's one in the chat from Carl. Where do you get your flax seed? Is it the same thing as used for linen?
It is. It's the same thing used for linen. That same employee who does the chicken project also is part of a flax seed breeding collective. I might be saying that quite a little bit wrong, but she's harvesting flax for making linen, and she just has extra seed, so she just trades it to me for ground to grow the flax on.
For
Hey,
the
Tenzin.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, so sorry. Thank you so much. We're just starting to think about our cover crop mixes. Are you buying these pre-mixed, or are you
No.
mixing yourself?
I mix myself because I'm constantly tweaking it and playing with it and trying to accomplish slightly different things. So sometimes I'll buy oats and peas mixed, just kind of depending what's readily available. But mostly I'm buying everything individually and just mixing it myself.
Thank you.
For the oats and the millet and the clover, are you kind of flattening those and then broadcasting, or broadcasting and then?
So what I'm doing is after we shape up the beds, what I have is beds that are raised and pretty well covered on the edges, and then like this big, because we're gonna drive back in the same wheel track, it just like makes this hard packed ridge down the middle.
Yep.
So then I take a tractor that pretty much this is its only job is cultivating bed edges, and so it's got spider hose that run belly mounted. And it'll go along and it'll just sort of extra fill and even up the bed edge covering. And then it's got wide rolling baskets that run along behind it in the wheel tracks. And they just gobble that ridge right up and spit it out. And so then instead of that hard ridge, I have kind of a smooth, it's pretty chunky usually, but
Yeah.
it's flattish, and there's pockets in there for seed to set in instead of all just washing to the corners. And then I take just a simple Scott's garden spreader or like lawn spreader that's about 32 inches wide, 30 some inches wide. And it's a bit tedious, but what I do is I take the oats and the millet and I take some of my compost tea and I wet that mixture and get it all mixed up. And then I dump in a bunch of usually azomite or some sort of a cakey clay agent, and some uh, and my white Dutch clover seed, about half of the white Dutch clover that I plan to put in there. And then I just mix that all together. And as that cakes onto those like oat seeds, especially not so much the millet, the tiny little white Dutch clover will stick to the oat seeds and that helps it go out of the spreader more evenly. And it also gives me an opportunity to inoculate the whole field with compost tea. But then I also just like, as I'm pushing the spreader, I'm like awkwardly carrying this little like ball jar usually of clover seed. And then I just like stop every 50 or 75 feet and sprinkle like a tablespoon across the top so that because it like just sifts itself right down through so fast. And if I do both of those things, we seem to get a pretty even layout of the white Dutch clover in the end. Otherwise, we tend to have just like if I just sprinkled it in, it would just like come out for 15 feet and then you wouldn't see any for the rest of the walk. And if I just did the other thing, the start of the bed would be good, but then the back end of the bed, it would all have kind of worked itself loose and sifted down through.
That's genius to get them to clump onto the oats like a nerd's cluster thing.
Yeah. Yep.
And the spreader you use is just like a drop spreader, right?
Just a
So
little drop spreader. Yeah. Simple like thing you'd get at the hardware store.
yeah,
Um,
I have one too. I love that thing for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and because the oats are so big, I I had to just like take there's like a cable adjust thing, like a little dial. And it's just on this cable, but I couldn't get it to open up enough. So I just like bent a piece of wire around to pull that cable even a little extra tight, and then the oats go through and they don't bog down in there.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Carl, I see you have your hand raised. You have a question?
Uh, excuse me. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
A couple questions. I see you're in Athens. Is that lighter soil? Tenzin?
It's a silt loam, but it's a real heavy silt loam.
Oh, okay. And then seems to me an advantage. Well, do you have enough acres that you can leave some go in different cover crop mixes over the year, or do you have to grow on it pretty much every acre every year?
Well, this system is so we've got 5 fields and one of them is fallow each year and that just kind of rotates around. So this is the fallow block. So this goes through that whole year without
Okay.
getting cropped.
So that leads to my final question then. Fertility, you started mentioning that with the compost and so forth. Um, Seems to me after a while, all you'd need is some nitrogen on your crops. P and K and all that would be plenty.
Um, Boy, I don't want to start an entire another thing. I've just kind of wrapped up doing I did like a full soil remineralization program, kind of the Albrecht method.
Yeah.
I broke it up for, financial and just uh scaredy pants reasons. I broke it up over about a 4 year. It actually turned out to be 5 because only the cropped fields got it. And so anyway, over 5 years, we got them all, got each field got that, like a quarter of it each year, and then a fallow year. And so I'm trying really hard to move my fertilizer program to all compost based, but I do add soft rock phosphate into my compost pile, as well as boron and a few other micronutrients that I spray in there. And then I also add purchased compost like Revita Pro from Ohio Earth Foods. So it's sort of like a, not quite a pellet. It's not CPM exactly. It's fully composted. It's not heat treated, but it's a similar sort of a product. So it's kind of a 4-3-2
So,
type product.
so you're not seeing a buildup of excessive phosphorus?
No, but we were at a major phosphorus deficit.
Oh, okay.
So that's the last thing to come around because there's more application limits and because well, it's just a slow needle to move anyway, but and that was our biggest missing, main player.
So that might have to be modified in the future. You-
Yeah, oh yeah, I plan to modify that program. I mean, we soil test regularly and I will adjust my strategy based on soil tests. But yeah, the main thing I've been trying to get in is phosphorus. And actually so during those 4 years, I kept adding soft rock phosphate and I just wasn't moving the needle very fast on our soil tests. So I'm really hoping that this compost based program will give me more. And also adding that soft rock, instead of putting the soft rock into the field, I'm putting it into the compost pile. I think that's going to give me better resolution on the phosphate, uh, in terms of available phosphate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tenzin. Just want to make sure we give Solveig enough time
Yeah.
to, so I'll pass it over to you, Solveig.
Good stuff. Howdy. Because if you unshare your screen, I'll share mine.
Oh, I sure will as soon as I figure out how. There we go.
There we go. Nice. Okay. Okay. You guys see what you think you should see?
Yep.
Perfect.
Looks good.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Let's see. I am the coordinator for the Cover Crop Breeding Network right now. I am from Wisconsin. I was a farmer in Northeast Iowa for the first 8 years of my adulthood, and then moved into the seed world and eventually did a doctorate in plant breeding at UW-Madison. So you all are where I'm used to being and where my family is. So, but today I want to just talk a little bit about our cover crop, specifically our winter pea cover crop breeding program, which is the one that I lead. And I'll be brief and glad to answer questions that come up. So we are a nationwide network of ARS breeding sites, universities, NRCS plant material centers. We've grown to include all these many sites over the years. This year we had 9 breeding sites, 2 farmer breeders, and 14 trial sites across the country. We're a public cover crop breeding effort. We're the first public cover crop breeding effort. We started with 3 legumes, the 3 most popular winter legumes: winter pea, hairy vetch, crimson clover. Started working on rye a couple years ago, and then brassicas, specifically canola, joined the club last year. We're based out of Cornell. My boss is Jenny Moore, who's also a UW-Madison graduate. Our breeding pipeline looks a lot like many, if you've been around plant breeding before, but generally we source the germplasm we're going to start working with, look at it in a nursery. The best things from the nurseries go on to advanced line trials, and as things look better over more years, the trial plots get bigger till we finally get to full field sizes. So that's how we breed for cover crop performance. And the other side of it is seed yield, so that cover crop seed stays, hopefully becomes more affordable, and allows the seed producers to also make a profit off of their seed production. And then we move to release and commercialization. So for the pea program specifically, most of our germplasm is sourced from Rebecca McGee, who is a recently retired winter pea breeder from at the ARS station in Washington. I got to take this program over when I started this position a couple of years ago. So I did my first crossing block in the greenhouse last year, which was really exciting and definitely one of my favorite ways to spend time. Selection for winter pea is sometimes performed completely by the weather. So we just collect whatever survives. Other years we have complete survival. So we select on, you know, our biggest traits to prioritize after winter survival are vigor in the spring and biomass. So how much plant material total is going to come off the plant, be able to be worked back into the soil. And then fall vigor is kind of a secondary objective. Our nationwide trialing has shown us where we get partial winter survival, but not total winter survival, because if nothing dies, we don't learn anything. And if everything dies, we can't collect any seed. But this sweet spot here in the upper Midwest, we've learned is a great place to breed for winter survival. So that's where we've placed some on-farm nurseries over the years of the project, many of which I was in grad school for and wasn't with the project. But Lisa Kissick-Kusick, who some of you may know, thought of the winter pea on-farm breeding as a Goldilocks story. So in the years that she ran the program, they put variable winter pea populations in 24 different sites. 15 were too warm, so almost everything survived. Didn't learn much about winter survival. 5 were too cold or too icy. So like an open winter like you're having right now is really tough for winter pea survival, which I probably don't need to tell any of you. But when that happens, everything dies. We can't collect seed back from the better or the more hardy lines. But then a few are just right. So we have partial survival. We test all these lines in advanced line trials, which are basically a 15-foot row of pea flanked with triticale to simulate the competition that pea would get in a legume and grass mix. So let's see. Wyo Winter. Is anybody familiar with Wyo Winter? One of the more well-known winter pea varieties. It's our best check for the combination of traits that we prioritize. And in most existing winter pea varieties, you see this trade-off. So fall vigor is less, so the plants are more compact in the fall, but they survive better, and then they put on more biomass in the spring. So that kind of less good fall vigor, but good winter survival is the traditional kind of profile of a winter pea. But we're seeing that linkage kind of broken. So some of our material is showing better fall vigor, so better weed competition in the fall, and also good winter survival and biomass in the spring. So that's exciting to see. And also I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this example of marker-assisted selection. Markers, okay.
I get it.
Yeah, okay. Another element, let's see, how am I doing on time? I got it. Okay. We're doing some research in freeze chambers. This is work from University of Minnesota, basically putting pea germplasm through a freeze and thaw protocol and seeing who survives and who doesn't. This shows some progress. So in this earlier generation, the F3 generation, almost nothing was surviving or showing no damage. But then after a generation of selection, you know, up to 30% of families are showing no damage. So that's progress, which we like to see. We're also doing some on-farm work. So I've done a winter pea variety trial on about 70 farms this year. Next year, we'll start putting out cover crop breeding advanced lines. This year, we started with commercially available lines just to get started. And so people can, you know, go out and purchase things if they find things they like. I could say more about that, but we're evaluating for flavor as well, to see if that's of interest to people. Making videos to explain trait ratings using the seedlink feed or social media feed embedded within the seedlink platform. Then you have used that, which has been a cool way to correspond with the growers who are keen on using that, and a cool way for them to talk with each other. So yeah, a couple different, most of the germplasm in our program is normal leafy, so the kind of pea that you're used to seeing that is indeterminate, vines and vines and vines. You might be familiar with semi-leafless or aphila types. There are definitely some vegetable peas of those types. So we are trialing both of those, and our experimental germplasm contains both of those types. I'm excited about putting some variable material out on farms next year, I hope, if funding happens, from those crosses I did in the greenhouse last winter. So yeah, I would love to hear anything else that anyone is curious about or has time to stay and chat about.
I use a lot of pea cover crop in different systems on our farm, and I am super interested in fast, like robust initial growth, but then and some frost tolerance, because we have just a really short season here. So I would love it to survive some frost, both early and late frost, for different reasons. But I do often prefer it to winter kill.
Yeah, that was actually on my list of questions for you all. Is you know, we had a really mild winter here last year, and so things that people expected to die just didn't, and that it caused a spring management issue that people weren't expecting. So yeah, it's occurred to me that we should be selecting for cold susceptibility in addition to cold hardiness or resistance. Yeah, but that the fall vigor is important because you want something to put on good biomass in the fall. That's good information. Okay.
And then does it matter if I plant winter peas in the spring or spring peas in the fall if I'm not looking for overwintering?
Basically, well, if you really don't want overwintering, you shouldn't plant winter peas in the fall.
Right.
Because if you have a milder winter where you are, they could survive. Definitely no harm in planting winter peas in the spring. We do that all the time for seed production in areas that, you know, could quite plausibly have winter kill. I think you'll get more biomass off a spring pea in the spring than a winter pea in the spring. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your systems as well.
Yeah. No, keep up the good work. It's great. We just started using the Wyo Winter maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and it's been great.
And you like it. Yeah.
Yep. But
yeah,
we've also had really
consistent.
really open winters, so it hasn't persisted to a point where it's a problem, you know. I don't mind seeing some green out there in the spring, but I don't want to have to like make a bunch of extra passes to manage it.
Right. And you're planting it in a mix with rye.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
so that's not reliable. Yeah.
Sometimes I also do it in anytime it's in with rye, I don't care if it overwinters. That's fine.
Yeah.
In fact, I often put vetch in that mix as well. But a lot of times I'll plant oats and peas because I want some growth in the fall, but then I need to get in right away in the spring, so I don't want a whole lot of.
Yeah, absolutely. yeah, it's crossed my mind to like do a divergent selection for, you know, say an oat pea cover crop that is designed to be winter killed versus a rye pea cover crop that people want to survive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep you all posted for our participatory opportunities when they come up. I should have more info on that in the next few months.
Great.
Yeah, for planting this fall.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much, Solveig. Yeah, and thanks
Absolutely.
to all speakers, Tom and Tenzin. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. And I dropped the link to the session evaluation there. Be helpful if you could give some feedback. But otherwise, February 10th is our next meeting, and I'll send out more details on that as we get closer. But yeah, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.